welcome to our next episode in our series, The Future of the Built Environment. We've got a fantastic panel again today. I'll allow them to introduce themselves shortly. But what we're going to discuss today is the impact of AI on real estate. Are you going to let AI take your job? So just before I allow the panel to introduce themselves, just a quick intro from me. I'm Alex Whiffin. I'm a co-founder and managing director of Cherry Pick People. Our consultancy specialises in talent solutions for the prop tech and real estate environment. We partner with businesses both large and small to help them with their talent processes and ultimately help them identify, acquire and retain the best people. So what I will do now is just allow the panel to introduce themselves before we get stuck into the topic. Serge, you're on my top right there. So do you want to go first?
Sure. Hey, thanks for having us, Alex. I'm Serge Van Dam. I'm an early stage fintech and proptech investor. Most of my investments in the proptech side are for property management, real estate related. So a couple in the residential space, Landlord Studio and Tapi, one in the commercial space released, and then some other things around the built environment. But I'm really a cloud software investor, data-centric propositions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Serge. Gabby, do you want to give us a quick rundown of you?
Yeah, so I'm CEO of Future Ratio. So we work with companies, small and big, FTSE 100, Wall Street, down to startups in various sectors, and we help organizations refocus on where and how they need to grow. So I don't have a particular focus on real estate. I'm more involved in AEC. I'm an investor in some AEC startups. I help them commercialize, raise funds and commercialize those propositions. So I'm here to give probably a slightly more general view of what the impact of AI is generally on business, but also what it is on AEC and real estate.
Fantastic. Thanks. And Elaine?
Yes, good morning for having us. I'm Anna Waha. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Buro Happold. And in that role, I'm a digital agitator and try to drive the culture at Buro Happold, who designs real estate, design the built environment. And so our clients typically are investment funds, owner operators that want new assets, but increasingly asking us how to use their assets better and how to mobilize technology to make it work better. And this we do worldwide. Today I'm in Bangkok, but we operate from LA all the way across the Pacific to New York, going through Middle East and Europe.
Fantastic. So yeah, thanks so much, Elaine, and everyone joining us. I see we've got over 50 people live on the webinar at the moment. So do say hi and let us know where you're from, and also or where you're watching from. And just by way of introduction, I mean, today we'd like to go sort of beyond some of the often the usual topics that are discussed in these sort of discussions around innovation and the built environment, or just go deeper. I mean, obviously we know a lot about the fact that real estate and the built environment is sort of quite far behind other sectors, and it often talked about the fact that there's little collaboration between companies, and these are problems which of course are relevant, but we're keen to go deeper and look at maybe how where AI adoption might be higher or lower than other technologies that have been utilized within real estate. How AI how someone might use AI to outperform their peers in their role, or that sort of stuff. So, or what skills you might need. So we're keen to go a bit deeper today. My first question is AI's rise in in the real estate a game changer or a job taker? Are we on the brink of industrial revolution or a job crisis? So, I know just before we were talking, we're having a great debate, and Gabby, you had a few stats on this topic. So maybe if you want to kick us off on this one.
Sure. So as I said, I'm more of a generalist, but so there's a view that, so the World Economic Forum has done some modeling, and, you know, to what degree everything is, you know, 100% correct, we don't really want to debate that. But so by 2025, and that is tomorrow, essentially, 85 million jobs are due to disappear because of AI. However, 97 million jobs, so, you know, a small percentage more, are going to be developed on the other scale of that by 2025. So it isn't necessarily about AI taking all of the jobs, changing all of the jobs, disrupting all of the jobs, or the way that we develop our businesses. There is a shift. And it's understanding where that shift is, how we can influence that shift for the better of the world, or the built environment, real estate, you know, AEC industry, whichever you want to talk about. And it's about understanding what that means to all of us. So if you are a job seeker, it means something to you. If you are somebody who's got a budget to transform your organization to be way more efficient, it's another thing. But there is a shift. There isn't necessarily it's all gonna go, but there is a shift, and it's understanding how we can maneuver towards a better world using AI. Are we going to be frightened of it, or are we going to embrace it? Are we going to be a passenger, or are we going to be a driver? It's that kind of thing that excites me about it. Any innovation, any development, any change, any transformation brings worries, but it also brings opportunities. And so that's how I thought I'd frame, you know, my initial contribution, and maybe we can start off on this.
Definitely. And Elaine, you were talking also about your dinosaur analogy. Maybe you could.
Yes, I think it's a really exciting moment, and as Gabby just mentioned, you know, it seems a titanic shift is about to play out. Yes, I was mentioning, you know, the dinosaur extension. Did it play out in tens of thousands of years or a matter of months? We don't know. But of course, that's deeply relevant to us if we'd like to understand this AI shift is going to happen in a generation. We don't have to worry. The educational system is going to take care of it, or is going to take place in a matter of weeks, in which case we better get busy. But I think Gabby also said something very important very early on around our sector being very, you know, low digitization of the sector. And this is something that really is of deep fascination to me, that, you know, we have in front of us a climate emergency driven majorly by the built environment. And we have an industry that has a low level of digitization. So is this the moment where technologies like AI allow us to digitize the built environment and unlock that digitization when we need it the most? That's what excites me. And we have in the room, you know, software investors, and they're seeing that. So I think I'd love to hear from Serge what opportunity he sees.
Well, there's lots to discuss there. I guess my broad starting observation would be that the longer an industry has been around, the less it thinks it will change. And so, you know, owning buildings is a very old sector. And compared to other things, I was involved, spent 10 years in digitizing retail banking. And, you know, that happened, well, you know, my involvement had, you know, stopped 10, 12 years ago. And banks were very early to adopt digital technologies. And as you've said already, the property sector or the real estate sector has not really. And it just does relate to how long the sector's been around. I wouldn't say it's an arrogance, but it's, you know, we've been around forever, a bit like the dinosaurs, been around for 160 million years. Probably nothing's going to take us out just now. So I, you know, I do see that's a real challenge, that sort of change preparedness. There's massive opportunity. I agree with what's already been said. The question is the likelihood of the industry embracing it. And I don't really see many signals of it, right? If I go and meet software engineers, I'd say 70, 80% of software engineers are using AI today to improve how they do their jobs. If I go and talk to real estate professionals and property management firms and ask them, the answer is almost zero. even from the very basics. So there isn't this kind of native embrace of new technologies, and it's kind of that change mindset that probably needs to change more urgently than anything else.
It's interesting because I'm involved in a startup called Birdflocks, and they're looking at how can we digitize the whole industry more. It's a huge task. It's a massive task, but their segmentation is important. If you talk to somebody who's been in the industry for 15, 20, 30 years, there is like 1,000 question marks above their heads. If you talk to somebody who's only been in it for maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years, or is looking at going into it, they are lapping it up. They really do want to change. They really do want to connect in a different way. They really do want to make things more efficient and do things differently. And I think there is this thing about, I've been in this industry, let me protect it, versus I'm coming into this industry, let me disrupt it. And I think that is where we, if we can help enable that. I saw on one of the comments on the right-hand side here, there's a company that's helping lawyers through AI disrupt more and be better. What a wonderful startup to be involved in. We need way more than that. And there is a lot more intellect going into that now than there was maybe 5 years ago, driven by the ability to use technology in a different way. And so I think the shift within the time within which things can change in the AEC industry, real estate being part of it, maintenance being part of it, and so forth, it can take a very different step now. Maybe 10 years ago it couldn't, but now it can. It's a little bit like you talked about retail banking. Retail banking got really a boot up their butt a little bit by people going into fintech and disrupting it. Otherwise, it would have taken even longer. It's taken long in insurance. It's taken long in all the industries that were kind of comfortable in what they were doing, that were transaction focused. And I think that there's a momentum now where there is change. I mean, obviously in the last year or two, high interest rates, high rates of inflation, broken supply chains, that's kind of dampened it a little bit again. But I think there's a hiatus, and in a sense, it's kind of our responsibility to help carry that more.
Can I just jump in there quickly, because I would like to field this question. Perhaps Serge might be the one to start with this one, but there's Simon Kennedy he says a property software developer looking at how we can get AI working effectively in our industry. And I know you're investor in some property management tech firms, but I'm sure everyone can have a thought on this. How do we get the people to start paying more attention, or the decision makers further up within organizations to sort of embed this and get AI working more effectively?
Well, I think the starting point is likely going to be embedded into existing software packages. So if I think about a couple of examples, Tapi is a property maintenance software, operates in New Zealand and Australia specifically, but we know what the cost of replacing a towel rail might be on average, right, in New Zealand. And so when our user gets a quote from an electrician to replace a towel rail, Tapi can say the average, in real time, the average for a towel rail in this region is $350 or whatever it happens to be, right? And so surfacing these things inside existing products is going to be a way of increasing trust and opportunity, or perceived opportunity, from users. So that's probably the easiest place to start the change readiness process, right? It's not overwhelming. It doesn't fundamentally change the industry. Having a little pop-up tell you that you're probably being quoted too much to replace a towel rail, it's hardly going to change the world, but it gets people believing that there's a role to be had there. So I think that's the starting point, and I'm most interested in this change readiness that I've mentioned already. Now, obviously, sorry.
I was going to say, do you think? I mean, that's like you say, very subtle, sort of coming in at the bottom and changing people's behaviour. Under the radar almost. But do you think? Elaine mentioned earlier, is it going to be quick? Is it going to be slow? The world is moving really fast. Are businesses under threat of falling behind? Is that what's going to kick them along?
Well, that's
where they go, oh, the competitor's taken over and they've 100% more productive, 1,000% more productive than all my guys because they're using AI embedded in everything we do, and we're taking over.
So that's, a lot of that answer comes from economics theory and the battle between transformation and disruption, right? And can a disruption play out? And so this is something we looked at, for example, with the UK government, with digitization of the sector. And because the sector is an ecosystem, it's probably not possible for a disruption model to happen. So that means that the incumbent can enjoy a systemically locked ecosystem where an economic advantage derived through the adoption of technology actually does not necessarily confers a capital advantage and therefore above average capital return, which would drive a transformation. And equally, because you don't have a re-intermediation in play, because we talk about retail banking. Yeah, retail banking worked because you could acquire the customer away from the brand. Music disruption happened because you could acquire the customer away from Sony, right? Because the customer was accessible. In real estate, the customer is not accessible. Or when it is, you don't call it AI or real estate. You call it service. You call it Uber Eats. You call it, all your customers that are eating and you sold them a kitchen. Now they don't need a kitchen. They want food delivered. That's called Ility, and it's a unicorn. So we really need to think about it back to, okay, how does technology absorption happens? And indeed, as Gabby says, it is about behavior, and we're seeing a massive influx of people that want to mobilize technology for a better built environment, enter our sector. And that's really a tapped potential. And I like to think that a lot of them come to Borough Happold because that's the environment we want to create. But then we have to actually transform that at the board level into real business outcomes. And I think that's where Serge was really pointing out something very important is those that have the commercial relationship to deploy technology in businesses, existing commercial relationships, this is where they can insert technologies that are AI, but they just happen to be, a better mousetrap. Is now an AI-enabled mousetrap. And I think that's really important to understand. And I think, for example, I saw some questions around AI and IoT. Of course, because IoT is useless. It generates millions amount of data. We can't make no sense. Not economically. You can never write all the rules that you need to make money out of the data streaming out of IoT, like switch off the light. How much are you going to save? Not much. Move the lift. How complex is the rule to be written for it to actually get a positive yield on your course? And then you say, but can a self-learning algorithm write the rules and continuously improve and react? Yes, it can. Have we found that out? Yes, we found that out. When? 7 years ago, Daniel Davis wrote an optimizer for floor plate distribution. It's embedded in the yield on real estate that WeWork does. Is it called AI? No. It's hidden, but it's already in play. So it's really about the mindset of new people coming in and mobilizing it through existing approaches.
Excellent. There's an interesting point here that a LinkedIn user has made. I don't know who it was. So thank you to whoever's out there. It says hello all. Serge's points, restarting point, and Elaine's current points are interesting. How do they combine what McKinsey said in Q2 2023? The most traditional industries operating on pen and paper are paradoxically better able to leapfrog conventional desktop software and benefit from AI opportunities. So, is there an opportunity there potentially for the real estate sector that we've talked about being traditionally behind a lot of other sectors in digitization can jump ahead?
Yeah, but the challenge with leapfrog is the incumbents are never left at the end of it. So
Yeah.
I think that is a very valid point and alternative model rather than the iterative improvement one that I just made before. This is an opportunity that new entrants come in and just have a wildly different model, right? Come in and do property management in an automated way, for example, at a 10th of the price, and just fundamentally different. And obviously all powered by digital technologies, augmented by AI, very data driven. You know, you only take contracts. So, I mean, to give you, only take the kind of contracts where you know that you can make money because you've got all the data, blah, blah, blah. So I do think that leapfrog opportunity is available in the sector, but my starting position would be it's not going to be for the incumbents to get the game.
Incumbents or transformative, I think it's really interesting to separate people from organizations. So I think, Gabby, you made the point that the people mobilize technology, they all want to do it, right? So one of my starting questions has always been, I've been told my industry is the least digitized, but when I walk onto a construction site, I don't see people that are digitally illiterate. They all have an iPhone, they're all using WhatsApp. What's really fascinating is if you ask contact people, what contact do people use? They talk about weird and wonderful software, some of them valuable, like Procore, but the number one application is WhatsApp and WeChat in China and Southeast Asia. They don't actually see that the people are digitized, but the software vendor and the digitizer are not connected to the needs. And there is a real opportunity for that leapfrog of completely new people. And remembering the killer skill, Alex, the killer skill of our century is to know how to use tech, right? And it came earlier on. I'm a geek. I was the one writing Excel formula and code in my processor, 30 years ago. But I actually, got out of the lab and said, let's make it work. And then now I'm left at the industry, the least digitized industry, because we still have to make it work. So this challenge is, still there. But those people exist, but then will they be stopped by their corporate? Will they create a new insurgent? Or will they find a corporate that says, guys, we have a trusted brand to make and operate buildings. Come and work for us. We will enable you to use your impetus, your culture, your enthusiasm for technology. And it so happens that we need to do that now. I'll say it again. We have a climate emergency. We have an affordability emergency. Let's attract people to our industry. Don't let them pervert democracy. Say, you can go and write code and pervert democracy. That's really nice. Or come and solve a climate emergency. It's probably nicer.
Definitely. I mean, I suppose coming back to the title of the webinar in terms of, are you going to let AI take your job? I mean, you talked about people coming in there with the expertise to help change the climate emergency, but, maybe thinking about on a broader spectrum about people, currently in a job and maybe not that isn't affected by AI at the moment. What types of skills do you think people need to develop or understand or work more on in this modern world? Let's assume that AI is going to be a game changer and happen swiftly rather than in 30 years. Who would like to field this one first?
I'll start with a provocation. It's not an answer, but I mean, the fundamental question that a lot of really progressive professionals I work with are asking themselves is, how can I, within 12 months, how can I become 3 times as productive? And the answer isn't working 3 times as hard, or it might be.
It's not the best way. But yeah.
No, exactly. But and if you really provoke yourself and commit to that, whatever your job is, you could be an accounts payable person, you could be an estimator, you could be whatever, it doesn't really matter, right? And then go, well, what additional tools do I have? Elaine's point is right. It's not the human problem because they're using all sorts of they're using Strava to measure how fast they ran somewhere, and they're using WhatsApp to create distribution groups for, kids soccer or whatever it happens to be. So it's not that. And so basically just embrace technology, and AI will be part of it. And you might start with ChatGPT and then get into more sophisticated things over time. But it's how do I become 3 times productive within 12 months? And then you'll be on the path.
But also, how can you sometimes how can you motivate the people who sit above you, who sit at sea level, to speed up what they do? Because they've done what they've done for the last 20 years. That's why they're in those positions. I mean, I was talking to another company a little while ago, and they had such a blocker at sea level that they decided to put in an artificial board. It had no responsibility and no power, but it was a board of young people from different aspects, inside the company, outside the company, who understood technology in a very different way, partially AI, partially sensing technology, whatever it was. And they put that in, but they didn't put it in to make any decisions. They put it in to continually provoke, to continually ask questions. So, what Serge was just saying is like, how can I be 3 times more effective? They had the ability to ask questions, to push questions, and to very, very slowly bring change. We shouldn't have to rely on that. We should have boards that look at the future, understand where and how they roughly need to move, work with analysts in a way that what the analyst understands and doesn't push them to quarterly results all of the time. And we need to have boards that understand the difference between cost and benefit. And that often still doesn't appear in the right way. And so we need to enable and mobilize people within to ask those questions all of the time in a constructive way, what Serge just said. But there are a lot of, there's a lot of a kind of lack of speed at higher levels, and it's how do you get the budgets out of them? We go into the normal business development process, starts in, I don't know, July, August, September, whenever, depending on what organization you are. And we do the same thing, the business development plans, the process is the same thing. We need to really shake up a lot of strategic things within the businesses to be able to start that process, because net zero is not going to happen. I'm really sorry, but it's not going to happen the way that we need it to happen. And, I do a lot of work in clean tech, and we invest in clean tech. And, I work with organizations, we invest up to $500 million, sometimes only $50 million, sometimes 100, 300. There might be big amounts, there might not be big amounts. We're not working together. We're not recognizing a problem and try to solve it. We're all micromanaging. I'm in maintenance, I'm trying to do that. I'm in, making something slightly more efficient. We really need to shake up the C-suite in many, many organizations to work better together. And frankly, some of them probably shouldn't be there. And so,
But Gabby, that's a worldwide problem that's been around forever. As you said, the reason those people are there is because they were successful doing that job 20 years ago. The real question is, what should a professional do? Then, if you're a quantity surveyor, you can't shake up the C-suite. You're just trying to figure out what you should do.
You get involved in helping to shape the organization go forward. You bring insight, because they're not asking for the insight. So if they're not asking for the insight, you bring the insight and the hello moment. And that is a long job. To go back to what Alain was saying is, can you do it by tomorrow? No. How long will it take? And that really depends on your industry. That depends on your geography. If you go to Dubai, things happen fast. If you go to China, things happen fast. If you go to the Netherlands, they happen medium speed. If you go to Italy, my goodness, it might be a little bit slower. So of course things develop at different paces. But where do I put my 8, 10, 12 hours every day? Everybody needs to ask themselves that question, in a sense.
Yeah, and I think what your recommendation there of having a board to address these issues is a great takeaway and an action point that could be implemented, and making sure people, are listening to people earlier in their careers who may have greater foresight.
Is it or not? Is there a more provocative take on that? Is that the board is actually becoming competent because it's a dinosaur, number one, and number two, I'm a great believer that we need to see this as the result of an exponential technology. And I think it's a headline kind of thing, but it is quite profound, because ultimately AI was anticipated as weak and strong AI, and weak AI is what we've got. And what I mean by that is a machine passes the imitation test of Turing. Turing test is not actually knowing whether that was going to happen. He knew in 1935 that it would. What he was asking is, would we call that machine intelligent? My answer is no, it's just an imitation machine. So we've got advanced curve fitting working in an n-dimensional space through very powerful GPUs. Great. What are we going to do with it? Well, there are two ways of answering that. One, you're going to deeply reflect and strategically decide what you're going to do with it, by which time somebody that just got on and built stuff and found out what worked and then made that grow will have outpaced you, right? So it's really a Formula One versus TGV conversation. If you want to build a TGV, culturally you need to be very structured. It takes 20 years, and you're typically French or Japanese, and those cultures are very strategic and get there. You then ask them to build a Formula One, and that doesn't work, because by the time the plan is in place and they know how they're going to win the championship next year, everybody else has ran 20 races, integrated all the information, redesigned their car twice, and the game has changed. And so the French Honda, Toyota, and the Japanese French Honda and the Renault never won a Formula One, except when they had a few Brits involved. Very interesting. So really think AI is a Formula One race. Break things, go win small races, then win the championship. The rest was steel. It's the past. It's the bullet trains. And it's very important to know how to, and then ask the question, in that world, what's the role of a board? The role of a board is to just encourage innovation.
Yeah, so that's why I think the model of bottom-up model of individual contributors using tools that they know how to use or figure out how to use is the right one to bring about the right kind of change, because it's not going to be top-down. It's not going to be board-driven.
They don't know what's going on, basically.
Yeah, so I think it's a perfect metaphor, and many of them are dinosaurs, but just the decision-making process of a board, they meet once a month at best, once a quarter. Much of it, it's just. I think the TGV versus a Formula One is a great metaphor, and so, I do think the great hope is that the humans who are the workers doing stuff in the sector actually just pick up the tools and start doing stuff and show the results.
Well, in order to do that, you need to secure budget, and so you do need to.
You don't need budget, Gabby. You don't need budget. I mean, yesterday I was shown a reverse engineered actuarial model being built on ChatGPT. It cost less than an hour's wage to actually get an AI reverse engineering an actuarial model. That doesn't cost anything. You can go and show your boss that.
This might tie into Mickey Rooney's comment. He said is the trick to this thorny issue of adoption to make the conversion convenient. So like you say, almost that the board don't have to put a budget in. People don't have to. It's not disruptive. Amazon focused on making our consumerist leanings convenient. Spotify commercialized what Napster did by using data to focus on convenience. Services into the built environment are onerous. They are inconvenient and thus ineffective, and result in relatively low productivity. So, does the adoption need to be convenient? Does it need to be under the radar? A bit like you said earlier in the conversation, Serge.
Well, yeah, I think these are odds. These two things are at odds with each other. So the TAPI example I gave, where you embedded in existing processes and existing systems, is the iterative way forward, but it takes, you know, years and years of continuous improvement before you actually have the new model. And I agree with Elaine. I don't think we have years and years. I think it's, yeah, I think the AI revolution is going to happen very, very quickly, and it's going to be affecting people very, very quickly, especially combined with tough economic climate, which is the case in most of the Western world, versus the bottom-up stuff. You know, some dude doing an individual contributor job inside a firm comes up with the better way to do it, and it does the job of 10 people, right? And that's the great unleashing. So it's convenient for that person, but it's not really embedded in
the culture.
Into existing processes, existing
yeah.
ways of doing things. Yeah.
Well, is it the job of the board then to drive the culture where it allows those individual
Yes.
contributors to have that impact, you know? And
I think that was Gabby's point. They created a separate board because the first one was incompetent to challenge. and I do agree with Gabby, actually. We do need budgets, but we need mechanism where the budgets are much more like buckets of resources, and are less tightly controlled.
Yeah.
You know, the Google 20%. I don't know if they ever existed, but something like that.
Yeah, but also the notion of, you know, I've got an innovation department. Anything you come up with within 18 months, it's going to be profitable. That is something that shouldn't really. That is, you're basically killing it before you do anything. Somebody was saying, JLL, I think it was Mickey Rooney here. Thank you, Mickey. You know, JLL buying up all of these technologies. Why are they buying it? Why are they not leasing it? Well, sometimes they, you know, big business buy things because they want to shut it down. Whether you're in the chocolate manufacturing industry or you're in the AEC industry or you are, you know, elsewhere, you buy it to shut it down. I've seen it so many times. It is extremely sad, but that is what happens. So the question between buying and leasing is almost, it's the right question, but the answer often is because I don't want anyone else to have it. And I put it in my bottom drawer. Here's my bottom drawer. It's full of stuff that I've bought. I've spent $1.5 billion in the last 3 years to buy stuff, and it sits there. I've worked with, like many of you have, with big boards, and you say, what is in your bottom drawer in terms of innovation, in terms of climate change, in terms of, you know, moving away from fossil fuel, They have huge amounts in their bottom drawer, but they never let it out. And
it's the Kodak analogy, isn't it, I suppose? And I know it's
Philip Morris, more like. Kodak never killed anybody.
Pardon?
Well, for me, Philip Morris is where we're, you know, or without wanting to pick on any tobacco firm, there was an industry that killed millions of people, knew how to solve it, and didn't do anything about it. And where we are heading is an industry that killing millions of people, not serving society, and knew how to fix it, but didn't.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be known to be, you know, an industry that didn't address the climate emergency, and because it was in the bottom drawer, and the board couldn't figure out how to make money, and they were quite happy to make money the old way that burns the planet, rather than a new way that doesn't. So
yeah. I mean, I have sat in board meetings where one board member accused the other board member to say, you didn't achieve your goals this quarter, your KPIs, and I'm not going to get paid my bonus. That was the discussion at board level, and that is frightening. That is totally frightening. And if you have that, you know, the shadow board I was mentioning, if you have a different attitude to why you go to work, why you invest your 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day, what is the reason why you do it? If we can help shift that, those questions about bonus will go away, and they should go away.
But I mean, the question was, what do I do as an individual when I'm, you know, we're not all board members, or certainly not everybody that I meet. And I think really the change, as Serge said, will come from attracting the talent that wants to deliver change, that wants to mobilize AI in our industry. And then the question is, what should they do? And I think they need to be interviewing their boards. I think they need to be challenging their boards and say, do you understand that in my generation, AI will change how your business works? So I want to do that with you as my board rather than your competitor. But if you're not going to put in place the competition, and I think there will be enough organizations that will listen to talent and say, we want you to come to work with us. Burr Apple is very poignant. We are actually next to Facebook in central London, and I'm just seeing all this talent streaming into a useless business, an advertising business, where they could be streaming into our business, where we've got a climate emergency to solve, and I think we want to configure talent to come to our industry and configure talent to come and challenge the boards to make their firms better.
Yeah, I agree.
So Alex, a couple of people have asked about data privacy, governance, security, etc. That's obviously a big topic, and most of you are in the European Union in one way or another. And I do think, I have quite a contrarian view on how little that will matter in the end, because of the productivity gains. So let's take the built environment. Like if you had cameras on every building site detecting how many minutes individual workers are working in a given hour, obviously there'd be lots of outrage, except if you're funding the construction of that building, and you actually have an employment contract with people who have agreed to work for a period of time. And so I just think we're going to see, my opinion is, it's just all going to become irrelevant very, very quickly, regardless of what regulators are saying. And then the other side is you get, countries like Spain declaring all these AI constraints at a policy level, which just means the talent on the AI inventions and innovations is just going to go to countries where the freedom to operate is much more pronounced. So I think there's some legitimate risks there. So I'm not naive, I don't think. My sense is it's just all going to become irrelevant very, very quickly. Once the products and the benefits are there, right? If something's a tenth of the price, do you really care about that?
I think you should. I think you should. We've seen it with food. I think it's not a problem that's unfixable. I think the Information Commissioner in the UK, we've written things like data for the public good, because ultimately, as soon as we declare AI just being advanced curve fitting, then it's a data play. How are you going to aggregate data across enterprise boundaries? Or you're going to make very large enterprises. Very large enterprise, the Chinese have already won. So either AI is won by China because they have large enterprise and no privacy law, or we're going to have to respect our privacy law and aggregate data across enterprises for the public good. And I think for the public good, plus good regulatory environment, plus good technologies that make it aggregatable, etc., while preserving individual persons. Privacy, rights to privacy, I think it's very apt. Maybe I overplay the Western democracy's love for individualism, but certainly in real estate today, there is a very large developer, very large, like 200 billion, is building an asset. I can't quite describe it, but let's say it would be 170 kilometer long.
Yes.
Its promise is that you will have the most livable city on earth, and it has a cognitive element that will deliver that livability with zero logistics, for example. Now, the fundamental underpinning law there is that you will have individual privacy of your data, and you'll be able to scrub your data, and your data will be encrypted and non-accessible by that government. I think it is quite important to understand that underpins the investability of that real estate. And so you cannot just wash it away. And I think it does underpin AI. But so, maybe we're a little bit far away from will AI take your job? But certainly that's just created 500 jobs for lawyers.
Yeah.
Or would you rather have a building built for £1 billion breaching the privacy of everyone who works building it, or would you rather not breach their privacy and having built for £2 billion?
I want both.
Because
I
those are the
want both,
trade-offs.
and I believe
Yeah,
we can
yeah,
deliver
those-
both, and that's why with the Alan Turing Institute, we've got good data for the public good, and we believe we can do both. It might be a little bit computationally harder, but we can do both.
But I mean, I'll give you an example. In a company that I'm close to but not directly involved, they put keyloggers on employees, found out 3 employees were working other jobs. Right? When I say 3 employees out of 40. So let's say
Right,
10%
but
of the
that
workforce.
goes.
On one hand,
that
because
is kind of another point that Elaine was making earlier on. Is the brand you create, the brand you create, and the vision you want to develop. If you are there to take the money, work another job, work another 2 jobs, you know that brand in the first place has created an environment that is conducive to that. I agree with Elaine in terms of privacy. Privacy has wide ranging implications, way beyond, do I go into work at 8 o'clock and do I come out at 5 o'clock? You know, like old people, you know, used to, I don't know, stamp in and stamp out. You still don't know how efficient they are. You know, people working from home nowadays, somebody can be as efficient in 3.5 hours working from home as they are 8 hours working from the office. And it's also about the
you can measure that today, Gabby, though. This is my point. You can measure that today. You're therefore invading someone's privacy. Does it matter?
More results focused, I suppose, rather than.
But will it take our job?
No, but
Will it
it's
take
not,
your job? Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, well, there are lots of people in this sector, like every other sector, who are not actually working properly in anything resembling operational efficiency. And so the question is, does their privacy really matter? And is the trade-off worth it? And I'm hearing from my European colleagues that, yes, absolutely, it's paramount. My view is in the very short term, it will cease to matter because you'll prefer the efficiency, the material efficiency gains.
All the individuals think
non-private.
that, though. You know, the corporations and.
Well, if I was working hard and my colleague wasn't, and we're both earning the same amount of money, and I thought actually if we all get key logs and surveillance technology on our desktops and our phones and whatever else, and I get paid 20% more and my colleague gets fired, then I'd be very happy with it.
It sounds quite a 1984 style environment, I suppose. But
yeah, but that's what we're heading into. And I know my insight is Europeans are not, and I'm calling you guys here.
Yeah.
You're not really seeing the trade-off. You think that
we do see
both things can coexist.
See the trade-off, but
there's an absolute trade-off.
It does definitely deeply rub up the wrong way, I suppose. It makes me feel uncomfortable.
No, I think I agree with. I agree with Sage.
I
mean, I think we can all see what you're saying. On the other hand, is, you know, privacy and data is very important for a lot of things because you don't know what happens to that privacy and data. So if it is to see how you work in a working day, that's one thing. If it suddenly affects other things, your data gets brokered, which invariably it would. There's such a wide-ranging implication on that you know, that's a totally different discussion. So
exactly.
It was always going to end up philosophical, but I didn't know that we were going to approach it that way.
But in some ways, it's not philosophical. If you're paying construction workers to build a building, should you have surveillance in place to see that they are working the 8 hours a day that you're paying?
Let me make a different question, a different point. Are we going to use AI to do things better, like make the construction worker work quicker, faster, more efficient? Or are we going to use AI to do better things? No construction worker at all. Why do we still have construction worker? Why is it not all self-assembly robotics? Right? Because the environment is really uncontrolled, and so it's not predictable. So I can't bring the predictability which I have indoor in a factory and turn a construction site into a factory. But with AI, which actually can, I'm going to have robots in there, and I'm going to say, how do I solve the productivity problem of the construction industry? By actually removing the people from doing dangerous jobs that the skills are leaving our industry and the youth doesn't want to take up. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to do better things, not things better. And privacy of robots, I think we are a few generations away from robots rebelling and asking for privacy.
I agree. I mean, Alain, you might be able to have more data on this, but prefabrication is something that has really grown and will continue to grow. And prefabrication in a manufacturing environment done by robots, then actually delivered to the construction site and used there. And
assembly side, no more a construction site.
The amount of budget, going back to Serge, the amount of budget you can save with that is enormous. I mean, some say it's up to 20% I don't know whether that's right, but
80%.
Oh well, then I can't read. Then I read it the wrong way.
So doing things better, right? Doing things better versus doing better things. Better things, of course, are manufactured, assembled buildings. And don't tell me, they all look the same. No. In the same way as all natural numbers don't look the same, but they're all made out of a modular number, which is called a prime number. I can build anything in the built environment. I just need to factorize it into its constituent prime. Computers can do that, human can't. Then I assemble it into a highly diverse and changing environment. Well, you told me, 20 years ago that cars couldn't drive themselves because it's changing all the time. Well, they drive themselves today, so we can do that. Then actually I'm going to challenge you and say, but why did you need all that built environment anyway? Because when we last looked through private IoT, we found out that 20% of the floor plate of a commercial real estate is not necessary. So with good data and AI, I can figure out where those 20% are in London. And as we know, this means that 20% oversupply through data of commercial real estate. Now, that means I don't need to build that much anyway. And then I'm going to make it work better anyway. So I think it's doing better things that we need to be focusing our technology on. We're pretty optimized at doing them the old way.
So what about leading on from that and back to the our title, will you let AI take your job? I mean, so how do those skills change? What are those things, even for the next generation? I see, kids at school that having to do their, write their English essays, they can use ChatGPT, you can do all of that. So, do the skills that the next generation need to focus on, or the current generation need to improve upon, are those the skills that the robots can't, robots or AI or technology won't be able to do? The interpersonal communication at an emotional level and that type of thing, which I feel is a long way away from any technology being able to implement. Is that where the humans are,
There's going to be an enormous shift. I mean, something like 60 or 70% of all jobs in a business environment will require some kind of upskilling, reskilling. You're looking at that we will need many more data scientists, digital marketing specialists, machine learning specialists, predictive analytics specialists, urban planning specialists, etc. And the more administrative job, the more administrative jobs, those are kind of going to disappear more, the accounts, that kind of thing. So there's going to be a shift. And you're quite right. Are we helping our kids learn about that? Are we helping our university students excel at that? Are we helping them to connect certain things? So it's data science with the industry, whether that is the built environment, whether that's manufacturing, 2.0 or whatever that is the learning environments we have. I mean, we're educating many more students online now than we are actually in the built environment. There is a huge shift happening.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a generational, and I see Damien saying, are we going to replace all the workers and with robots, and how will the unemployment rate? So the good news with construction anyway is nobody wants to come and work on construction sites, not unless they are actually supervising robots. So I think the more interesting one is about skills capture and knowledge captures, because today it's going to be a gradual thing. And today you really need to know what that knowledge that's leaving our industry, we want to capture it so that we don't, regress. I think that's a really important topic. So not being able to mobilize a technology that builds upon the knowledge of others. That's a very fundamental thing. So, going back to very simple models, like when we gave everybody a calculator, right? So the human computer went away, but, okay, they are immediately buts. Like, you've got a Stack Overflow. You need to know that if you do 1 divided by 9 times 9, you don't get 1 again. Right. That's a new skill that people didn't need to know, but now they can actually divide numbers very quickly. So really understanding how you look really intelligent if you knew how to go on the internet, and that was 1985, and then how you use a website, 1991, and when you started knowing how to use Google. My God, I looked intelligent those days when those people didn't know how to use a dial-up connection. Now it's just Google's called ChatGPT, big deal. But you need to remember, and I think that's the main, but you need to understand 2 things. How the technology works, right? Everybody knows the weather forecast becomes less predictable, but someday gets it more right than not. Now, if you are a sailor like me, you want to know why. You want to know what are the modeling techniques used by the weather model. You need to understand divergence and convergence of numerical techniques, and then you can make better use of the technology that everybody can look on the internet what's the weather tomorrow, but I bet you that I can do better use of it because I understand the underlying technology. That's number 1. And number 2, how do you build the skills? Those skills, Alex, that you described, the one that remain the human skills, right? That we acquired through a personal development through our lives. How do I acquire those when I just automatically getting an answer? I'm not puzzling it out. I'm not making a 15-year journey. It comes out in 100 milliseconds out of a technology system. How do I build perspective in my career? I think those will be the 2 things that we're going to be grappling with.
Okay, well, we're almost, the time is almost up, and it's been a great discussion. Just to wrap it up, I'd like, you've got 1 minute each to, what's your number 1 takeaway for anyone out there concerned about losing their job to an AI bot? What would you say? I'll leave it open to you. Serge, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So I'll build on Alain's point, which is trying to understand the technology that's going to replace you. And the best way to do it is to play with it and put time in your calendar, whether it's an hour, 1 evening a week or during the day to do that. And then, as I said earlier, I think the best thing someone can do is say, make a goal of being 3 times more productive. You can, in most jobs, you can measure that productivity and then figure out what tools and techniques you need to start using to increase that productivity. And you'll be rewarded for it anyway. And even if your job gets outdone by the robots, you'll be the last one out the building, which is generally what you want. So that's what I think.
Good stuff, thanks.
That's an interesting one. So that's understanding technology. Mine would be to understand the challenges to be. So, Alain mentioned, climate change, net zero. What are the real challenges our world has? And therefore, how can I, in the next 10 years, 20 years, however long whichever stage of your development you're at, how can I play an instrumental role in that? And do I really want to? If I don't want to, that's another thing. But if I think I want to, what is the role I can play in that? And therefore, what do I have to learn? What do I have to understand? Where do I have to educate myself? Where do I have to push, or where do I have to cruise? And, there is a lot out there that you can do without getting a budget from your boss. And I think our responsibility is to go beyond what our structure gives us, is, educate yourself, look around, learn. Don't be frightened to maybe move, push and move. If you've been somewhere for 2 years, that's great. I don't know how long you stay in the construction industry, generally in the real estate industry, I have no idea. but don't be frightened to move, because the challenges are moving, and if you understand them, you can move with them and actually make a positive difference to the world that you operate in.
Fantastic. And Elaine, you can have the last one.
Well, how can I build on those two super points? I think go and find a company that lets you mobilize AI, in the way that Gabby and Serge. I think, and I'll finish there. All these news came out of people blocking ChatGPT, and of course the Borough Apple partner had to raise the question. And what do we do? And it says, well, we do what we always did. We'll encourage the maximum utilization of technology to solve the problem of the built environment. That's what we did. And of course there are challenges, and of course there are limitations. And our commercial lawyer, May Winfield, who is a fantastic person, who's deep into AI, said, and I'll write a guidance note, and everybody's encouraged, go do it, and find a firm that tells you go do it, rather than, oh, this is illegal,
Well, illegal is illegal. But
Fantastic.
yeah.
Well, that's we're over time now. So thanks everyone for joining me. Thank you everybody out there who's been watching, and for all your comments. It's great. I'm sorry I didn't get to ask all the questions, but it was really good to have that engagement. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.